Amethyst is saying it's a truth that doesn't need to be literal. Gosh, right? Stories are not literal. And we say you have to learn the language of stories to really understand and be able to receive the true depth and offering of them. So you go to France, you learn French. You go to the land of story, you learn symbol, archetype, metaphor. What is metaphor? It's the language of spirit, speaking through story, which is the ultimate translator of that which we can't understand. Isn't that cool? I don't know what your beliefs are, but if you believe that there are guardians that live in the unseen world, if you believe in angels or ancestors or spirit or the muse, I usually use the word life force, you know, and so or universe, and so a story oftentimes can take these languages that we don't understand. Has anyone had a calling? I'm just curious, where you really feel called to do something? Right, Dusty has, Dorothea has, Tina, Nicole, Carol, Amethyst, Caitlin. It's like, yeah, so you know what that. I don't know about you guys, but when I first started hearing my calling, it was like talking to somebody that spoke in a different language because I could feel it and I kept being like, what? What is that? And it just got louder and louder, and like they were yelling at me in this other language that I couldn't quite understand. And I think like that sometimes when you first hear a calling, you're like, I know that there's something there, but I don't quite get it. And then there's that deep quieting the self and listening. And it's from that listening that we allow that unseen realms to be able to speak through us. And one of the ways they can speak through us is through story. And so that piece of that, they don't speak literally. They often speak in this other way. And when you can open the mind and get out of that fact and information brain, and this is a fun fact for you, the information brain, which is the left side of the brain, it takes in the information. And what humans are constantly trying to do is we're not computers, we're not calculators. Okay. We are meaning makers. And so we make meaning through story. We don't make meaning through facts and information. And if you've ever been in a room that's been given an incredible amount of facts and information and you're sensitive to the energy, you'll start to feel it like get really heavy. And I started to wonder about that. And I was like, oh, it's because we can't metabolize this. We don't know how to make meaning from it. And what is facts and information? But it's like one thread in a great tapestry. And stories are made of many things living together, many threads coming together. They make connections. What are our archetypes of the story? Our archetypal energies are the spider web, the spider. She makes all the connections through time, through space. When you tell the story of your life, it's not linear. It's all of it together. I'll give you one of my favorite prompts right now. When you're telling a story about, especially a challenging story, I always like to state, where does this story really begin? Where does the story really begin? I'll give you an example of this at the end. Um, Caitlin's talking about it's voices of the past that never got to be spoken and that we might tell them now, right? So it's like there's this capacity to continue listening. They say that once a word's been spoken into a space, it stays there forever. That means that you can go back to places. I once spoke to the man who wrote The King's Speech. If you guys remember that movie, and he said, "I'm just a time traveler. I just went back in time and caught the story and brought it back." You know, Miriam saying it's the in and out of truth told in countless ways, right? And so truth, what a great term. So confusing. Truth is a carpentry term. It means a straight line from here to there. That means that we can all be sitting in a circle and then there can be a bunch of things between us. And Nicole can be on the other side. And I can say, well, my truth is I see a big purple vase. And Nicole can say, well, my truth is I see four little elephants. And we're both true. We're both accurate, right? So when we talk about this word truth, one of the things I love about getting to be a storyteller in our times is that we have this capacity to hold a lot in that space. We can hold a really big story. We can hold multiple truths. One of my favorite US news sources right now, there's a lot of people from the UK, so you might not care, but for the US, which is, we're getting more and more divided, is there's a news source called Tangle. They literally show all the different perspectives. And I love this. I'm like, my nervous system rests. I'm like, thank you for giving me the whole story, for showing me how different people are looking at these things. And we can do that for others. We can make space for more than one way when we tell the story. Margaret says, I have many callings, guidance often. I do not yet feel I have a big calling. Okay. So this story, another way they do something, right? They'll take us on a journey. They give us access to the unseen realm. They help us, they carry the past into the future. They help us be memory keepers. The story, another way of looking at it is that it's an operating system. It's an operating system, and that it teaches us how to function in the world. It teaches us our role, our belief systems, our values, what to believe in. This is one of the ways that we give this system of seeing and responding to the world is through this. So now think about, what were the stories that you were watching as a kid on TV? What were the stories that you were telling around your dinner table? What do the stories your family tell you that you inherited? What are they really good at? What are they really bad at? What role were you assigned to play in your family, in your life, in your work? How much money did you expect to make based on the stories that you heard? Where was the realm of possibility allowed or disallowed? These all live in the stories that we inherited, right? That's why, as a sacred storyteller, we get to sit back. We get to sit back and watch the show. I think about like sitting on the side of the highway. You're like, where does that story come from? Is that story still current in this time? Oh, that's a great story. That story's in service to life. I'll take that one. Thank you. Oh, that story is spreading hate and fear. No, keep on going. So as we don't want to become fragile, we don't want to not be able to tolerate or hear or witness a story that we don't like or agree with, because then we're missing out on what's happening in the world. So we want to be strong and we want to be resilient. And one of that is having very good, clear boundaries about what are the stories that we take into our consciousness and we continue to give our life force and our energy to. So I'm not talking about ignore what's happening in the world. I'm not talking about be so happy that you can't have any time or space for the injustices of this time. I'm saying make sure that you fill yourself with so much energy and so many stories in service to life that you have energy to address what is out of balance on the planet. Okay, so that's a story. What's a sacred story? We're kind of getting into it, but what's a sacred story? What makes a story sacred? Why do we have to use that word even to define it?
The anagrams to scared as well.
Say that again, Tina?
It anagrams to scared as well. And yeah, if you anagram it, sacred anagrams to scared.
It's to scared. Is that what you said?
Scared, yeah. Yeah.
Scared.
SCARED. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I like anagrams.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Caitlin's asking, does it involve vulnerability? Does a sacred story involve vulnerability? When you ask that, Caitlin, I think, oh, so some part of you is like, oh, right, is our heart in it? Is our heart in it? And is it open? Is it undefended? Is it courageous? Right. So one of the things that we know about sacred stories is that, right, there's going to be some aspect of connection. There's some aspect of authenticity. It's coming from my heart. It's not just coming from my mind. And the sacred story isn't just going to be facts and information about the state of the world. We're not going to be talking about climate change as a sacred story. That's just not. Sorry, folks. So Caitlin's saying, oh, okay, it's a ground. I can feel it coming and living in a different place in my heart. It's not coming from here. It's coming from here. Okay, that's great information. Jenny's saying sacred and sacrifice have the same root. Yes. Yes, sacra. God, I used to know what that meant, and I'm sorry that I don't have it on the tip of my tongue. A sacred story is connection between an individualized divinity and all that is force of life, says Dorothea. I love that. And Margaret's saying it has a universal feel to it, right? So there's this theme, there's this universality that it could speak to many, many beings. When I think of a sacred story, I think of, well, what is that word sacred? What are we saying? We're saying, I see the life in you, and I honor the life in you. And so when I'm speaking about a sacred story, I'm saying, oh, I'm saying that there's a being that has a life force all its own, and I'm going to come into relationship with it. Right. That says, so does Carol's cat. Carol's cat is like, I'm going to be in a relationship to this, right? So, but it's like, how do we, and I love this, let's use this, let's play with it. When you invite a sacred story into your life and you invite it into your lap, do you feed it? Do you care for it? Do you listen to it? Do you notice when it doesn't like something, when it does like something? What I understand about sacred stories is that they'll speak to us. Oh, look, Jenny's got a cat too. We've got a lot of cats coming around right now. Oh my gosh, so does Amethyst. Oh no, sorry, that was just your hand moving. So when we look at this sacred story, we're saying, okay, this is a living being that can inform me, that can guide me, that I listen to. I just shared that someone commissioned me to catch a story for them. And so I'm in this deep state of listening. It's not my brain being smart and clever and being right. No, it's this other piece of let me listen to you. So now, how can we look at our future and say, give me a sacred story about how to live through these times and into a world that serves life? When we talk about a sacred story, there's some key things. It's going to feed you. It's going to nourish you. It's going to open your heart. It's going to give you time and space to prance around your consciousness of your mind. It's not going to lock you into a room. It's not going to shut you down with fear. It's not going to paralyze you with data. It's going to open, expand, and create more space for connection, more space for life. It's like yoga for the mind. So oftentimes when I really hear a sacred story, I feel more enlivened, more engaged. I feel inspired. Maybe it unlocked the key of grief and I can access feelings that I haven't had. Maybe it's unlocking the sacred rage and I want to stand and protect something I care deeply for. So I'm not saying that a sacred story is all fluff and unicorns and clouds. That's not what I'm saying. One of my favorite examples is the movie Life is Beautiful. Did any of you guys get to see that? It's an amazing Italian film. It talks about the Holocaust, but it talks about it in a beautiful way that provides guidance and insight and knowledge about what one might do in such a situation to get through. And it's a love story. Right? So again, what is the role of the sacred storyteller? And we're going to get into that in just a moment. But when we look at how do you know it's sacred, asked Tina. I think to me, I think we're all going to have a slightly different answer. I'm just sharing what comes through me in this moment or after setting this. To me, it's really clear. It serves life. It's just clear. It serves life. It keeps the cycle of life going. It's going to guide me. It's going to create connection. It's going to give me good fuel. It's going to give me more access. It's going to help expand me. What would we talk about? It's universal, right? It's going to connect me to more things. And they're floating around, but there are these other things that we're surrounded by right now, and they're called zombie stories. So a zombie story is a story that's the opposite. It takes life, it steals life, it plants fear, it plants separation, it plants individualization. It paralyzes. And so we're surrounded by these stories right now. And one of these stories, I would actually say that I can't even believe they're bringing this story back to life. I can't believe it. Jaws. So Jaws was written by Peter Benchley. And he just heard some wild tale about a big, white shark, and he got curious. And so he went and he wrote a story about it. And that story got picked up by Steven Spielberg. He was at the very beginning of his career, and he wanted to create a story where he'd get recognized. And he took that story and he understood something about the human mind, which people have really perfected, which is that we're designed, our brains are dumb. Our consciousness is extraordinary. But our brain, made out of the material, is designed to keep the body alive. It's designed to survive. So it's extremely easy to manipulate. As soon as it thinks that it's under crisis or under threat, it will do all kinds of things to survive. You know, so when people understand how to use story against the brain, that's when we as human beings need to be like, wait, I'm actually gonna be more discerning and engage my consciousness and turn somehow I'm gonna relate the story and not let the story just get into my brain. That's we get more deeper into that in different classes. But in this case, with this story, Steven Spielberg understood that we need to look at what threatens our existence. And this was a great big one of the big first stories like this. And so they bring out and then they film it on the ocean. And it was the very first movie ever filmed out in the open ocean. Louise Erdrich has this great quote: "You might not know the old stories, but the old stories know you. And you might not consciously speak and understand the world through symbol, but we're literally programmed that way. And what does water represent but our unconsciousness?" And so remember, I don't know if you guys remember this this was back in the 70s, but people were so much more innocent in when they were seeing films. They didn't know how they affected them. And so like Star Wars back then was a really scary movie. Hard to imagine now that first Star Wars is scary, but it was at that time. And Jaws, it's filmed out on the open ocean and representing our unconsciousness, and they put the shark in there. And then what does the shark represent but our fear of death? And all of a sudden there became a global crisis of fear of sharks. And most sharks are like fish. And if you've ever gotten to be around sharks, they're affectionate. They cuddle together. They're so sweet. And yes, there are some great whites, and they've hurt some people, but there's more coconuts that fall out of trees and kill people every year than sharks. When Peter eventually understood the impact of his story on the globe, he spent the rest of his life being an ocean protector. So I tell this as a warning story. I don't think that there's a bunch of bad people trying to tell bad stories. I do think that there are a bunch of people who are driven by the mechanism of survival or greed or consumption or capitalism and are not taking into account the power of their word to impact the world around them. And so this comes back to, what is your role? What is your responsibility? Again, what is responsibility? Response able. What are you able to respond to as a sacred storyteller? And if there's anything I leave you with today, this is the great question I want to leave you with. What is your responsibility as a sacred storyteller in our times? Because in the past, the role of the storyteller was a sacred, honored role in society. They were known as the healers. They were known as the guides. They were known as the keepers of memory, of history. In Africa, they were known as griots, and they kept the genealogy of each family. And when you had a great disagreement, you didn't go to the king, you went to the storyteller. I just learned that. Isn't that kind of amazing? In Welsh, they have their word for storyteller means a guide between the worlds. So when we look at this role of what is it to claim that role of storyteller, and not just any storyteller, but as a sacred storyteller, now think about, what stories are you telling about the world? What stories are you using your voice and your heart to amplify? And then here's the big one. What stories are you telling to yourself about yourself? Because here's the kicker, we're all storytellers. It's just like it's part of the human job. We're just born with it. We're creators. We're creating with every word that we speak all the time. And our words aren't as powerful as they once were. That's just it. We don't live in the time of magic words. We live in 2025, and so many people have either been hypnotized to think that they have no voice, that their voice doesn't matter, or not given a place for it. Or maybe if you were a child, like I was, you were told that you were to be seen and not heard. Or now we're coming at the time when absolutely our world is being created every single day. by words, by your words. And so I really want to leave you with that, just knowing how valuable your voice is, how valuable your stories are, and to share them. And I'll share one story with you, and then I'm just realizing we're almost at the end of the time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you about some opportunities if you want to keep playing. And then for those who want to stay on, I'll tell you a 5-minute story. And I call those wisdom stories. And I'll give you the format of how to create a wisdom story. But first, if you want to keep playing, there's so many ways that we can keep playing. And as you know by now, I'm a devotee to the world of sacred storytelling. And I created a school called the School for Sacred Storytelling, and where we've been around since 2017. We've had over 50 teachers come through our space, people all around the globe of all different perspectives. And it's really a place that we are committed to fostering and remembering this ancient art form of really what teaches us and helps us stay in our humanity. That's one of the reasons why I'm so inspired to do it. I didn't know what it would mean. I didn't know that AI was coming when we first started creating this. And now I realize, oh my gosh, so many people are outsourcing their imagination or even outsourcing their creativity. And our creativity keeps us connected to our humanity, and it keeps us connected to being creators in the world. And so I don't know about you, but I still want to play a role in that part and don't need to hand it over. Not to say that AI isn't very fun and can save real time. Um, so what's coming up? We just started a class, and you have a chance to still join if you want. And this is the story of change. And it's really designed to help people through this time, through times of change and transformation. And you'll learn the technology of story, and you'll get to tell all different kinds of stories in your own life. And we're looking at it through, oh my gosh, we're in a changing planet. How do we live through this time? And you'll learn a lot of different techniques and practices to work with story and creativity as a form of healing and transformation. So you can apply this to many different aspects of your life. And it comes with, oh, I can even show you the Little Book of Change. Whoops. I wrote this book, and it was illustrated by a dear, actually, he used to be a student, and he had a talent that he brought to class. And I'm like, Mark, you're so talented. I was like, do you want to go make a book? Sorry, blur is on, so it doesn't work. But anyway, you get a PDF of this at the end, and you'll get guided through this. And it's really great if you want to really become a master of the art of change in your own life, or if you really want to help and support others. So that's coming up. Another way that you can work, if you're saying, I want to really do a deep dive in my personal story, and I know that I'm at a threshold, and I know that I'm ready to make a change, and I want to be held in a small, intimate group where I can get deep into that. And so if that's where you want to if that's how you want to play, I have a group called Luminary Circles. And this is a small group. We only take up anywhere up between 8 and 12 people usually. And you get a private session with me called a soul story, where I read your energetic field and a mythic story arrives, and it's a way of exploring your consciousness and really getting to see and be in relationship to your whole self. A lot of people say after the story, they're like, wow, you just saw things that other people don't get to see me as. And what it is you get to have the different aspects of the parts of you that live in other dimensions. It's so hard to explain to you guys. It's just an ancient form of being with story and healing and getting to see again your whole self. So what we do in that is you'll get a private session with me, and then you have 6 weeks to integrate that story and then dive deep into any other stories that you are really committed to healing and shifting and transforming. And we'll get to do that together in that time. And it's a way of just this committed group to being in relationship to story as a transformational process. And then you can always just get a soul story as a private session. You're like, I don't want that, but I just want the soul story. I do those. And then you can find that on my website. The last thing that I'm going to offer you right now um, is that you'll have an opportunity if you got the bug and you just say, I just want to know more about this sacred storytelling thing. I'm going to be teaching a foundational class called Myth, Magic, and Medicine. I'm teaching it as a one-day workshop. And what I'll say is it's on Zoom, but they're super interactive. We don't stare at Zoom the whole time. You get to work in small groups. You get a lot of creation time. It's like having think of it like as having like a private stay-at-home retreat, a creative retreat. And so that's also happening. That's in mid-November. And the last thing, I'm never supposed to, you're only supposed to share one thing, and I'm sorry because that's just what's happening. But I do want you to know about this. If you're just saying, I want a monthly hit, like I just want to get to know, I want a little story every month. I want a little story ceremony every month, and I want to stay connected to a community, then you might really enjoy our monthly membership. And for everyone who joins for the full year membership this week, we're running a special, which means that you can win a soul story. So everyone is joined into a lottery. So that is that. If you have any questions, I'm here, and we'll stay. You can post them in there. And do you want a story? Okay. Hi-yo, hi-yo. Hi-ya, 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 hi-yo. Hi-ya, hi-ya, hi-yo. Hi-ya, hi-yo. This story begins when I was 3 years old. My mother had a friend who was an embroiderer, and she made me this great, beautiful tapestry of this woman who was giving away flowers to all these children. And embroidered into that read Leah. My name was literally embroidered into the tapestry. It said, Leah, give what you have. To others, it may mean more than you dare to think. And I remember just being a little kid and reading that over and over and over again and not having a clue of what it meant. I didn't know what it meant. Give what you have. To others, it may mean more than you dare to think. And it kind of stuck in my mind, and I carried it like a mystery. And then all of a sudden, I was 29 years old, and I was interviewing for a job that I knew would be safe and would pay me all the right money and give me insurance. But as I was sitting there at that job interview, I knew that it would kill a part of me. And right as I had that thought, I placed my hand on my neck and I felt a, a bulge. I stopped the interview. I went to the doctor. I went to another doctor and another doctor. And 6 weeks later, I finally found a doctor that had the test that would determine what I had. And he said, don't leave the space. Let me get the results back. And he came back and he sat me down across from this big desk. And he had this big, thick document. And he told me that I'd just been diagnosed with a very severe, very quickly growing thyroid cancer. And then he also told me that the way that it was growing, that they were going to have to cut across my larynx, that there's a very good chance that I could lose my voice. And that's when I knew what I had. And in that moment, something happened. It's like this window of possibility opened in the room. Now, I told you guys a little bit before about my story and that it was a hard growing up. And in that time, I had learned a lot about the victim archetype. I'd actually learned how to master the role. I could out victim story anybody in the room. It kind of became a sport. It became the way that I learned how to be part of the story. But all of a sudden, when this guy gave me that diagnosis, it was as if he was coming towards me with this purple velvet pillow with the tiara of victimhood, and he was offering it to me. And I knew something inside of me said, no, not that role, not anymore. And I popped through this window of possibility. It was as if my soul was just waiting for the moment. It popped out, jumped through. I had no idea what the lines were on the other side, but apparently it was very funny. And I started laughing. And I told that guy, I bet you just say that to all the pretty girls, don't you? And he looked at me and he was like, no, this is serious. You could really lose your voice. I said, okay. And all of a sudden, I had a job. And my job was every time I went to the doctor, every time I got my blood drawn, every time I did anything, my job was to laugh, was to create a situation where the people with me could laugh. And I'm not saying that I wasn't filled with terror. I was. I was filled with terror. I was filled with fear. When they put the anesthesia over me, I remember I was weeping with the knowledge that I might not come out with a voice. When I did come out of the surgery, they had this mirror and a bunch of people were hovering over me. That had taken 3 hours longer than anyone had expected. And they said, just so you know, it sort of looks like a hockey stick on your neck. I had this scar. I looked like Frankenstein. I had these black cross stitches that went all across. And what were the first words out of my mind coming out of anesthesia? Looking at the mirror, I said, you monogrammed the initials of my name backwards on my neck. And they were like, who makes jokes like that coming out of anesthesia? And I said, I don't know. It's just something else was living through me. Something else had found another way of being in the world. My story is with thyroid cancer. They don't know how much medicine to give you. They gave me way too much medicine. It sent me into a state of almost being on speed 24/7. I went into a deep depression. I went into deep exhaustion. But what happened was at the beginning is it gave me a lot of energy. And so I jumped out of the hospital. I called up my friends. I said, let's create a garden. And they said, Leah, you're crazy. You just got out of the hospital. I was like, I know, I've got all this energy. Let's use it. And so we did. We created this 70-foot spiral hospital. That's interesting. Garden. That did turn out to be my hospital, my form of healing. Because when the speed exhausted my system and the depression set in, and I had just enough energy every morning to get up, to go to work, and to come back home, I thought, wow, if this is life, I don't know that I want to stay. But every day I walked that garden. And in that garden, I learned. And I learned how to pray. And I learned about gratitude. And I knew nothing of those things before this experience. And every day I walked in just giving gratitude for my life, gratitude for my life. And every day I walked out with my prayers for my life, to fully be here, to be fully aligned, to use my voice. And I do believe that it was those prayers that brought me here to you today. And so I share this story. I share this story as a prayer spoken out loud. That in that moment that you come to your own threshold of test, that in that moment when you don't know what to do next, that you have deep trust that your soul can come in line from the strangest, most unexpected moments when you let it and when you allow it to. Hi-yo, hi-yo, hi-yo. Hi-yo, hi-yo, hi-yo. Hi-yo, hi-yo. Hi-yo. So that is your story for today. When we do wisdom story classes, I break down the structure of that. And one of the things you saw is, where does the story really begin? It didn't start on the day that I got diagnosed with cancer, right? It's the story of a soul. It's the arc of a life. So sort of, where does the story really begin? You can use that as a great prompt. I wrote that story, by the way, in 7 minutes for a storytelling contest. You can do this too, right? You go to that every story there's always a threshold, some kind of push, some kind of test, somewhere where you didn't know who you were before. And you can only tell this story from looking back, right? At the moment, I didn't know that my soul was coming on live. I just thought that I had a very strange coping mechanism. But when you look back, you're like, oh, some part of me said it wasn't going to play the role it was before then. Some part of me changed, but you can't tell it in the middle. It's when you're looking back. Okay. Then the other piece that you'll see in the story is that every story has a fairy godmother. There's always something outside of the family system that will come to support. Okay, and so in this case, I had a garden. I also had a real fairy godmother, but in this case, the garden was my Yoda. Right? We always have something in there. So you have to really wonder. This is where you become a wisdom keeper, and you're giving people the keys to get through their own challenges in their life by sharing these moments of your own. At the time, I couldn't say that garden saved my life, but looking back, I can tell you that garden saved my life. So the other thing that you do is you also you bring people all the way home, and you can one of the best ways that you can do is you can give them a story blessing, and you saw that. And John O'Donohue introduced that idea, and Carolyn Casey followed it, and I got it, and so I got it through that thread. And the idea is that it's a giveaway now, that you're not telling the story just to be heard or to be seen, to be witnessed. It's a different kind of story. When you come to the threshold as a wisdom story keeper, you're giving the story as a gift, and you know the gems that live inside of it. And so you can end your story with a story blessing. And you can also do that through the form of a metaphor. So that's our class for today. I hope it blesses you in all the ways. And I'll stay on for a couple of extra moments if anyone has questions about the classes. If you are going to come join us for Story of Change, we're starting up. It's already started. You'll want to register today so that you can get your first day class and catch up with what we're up to. And otherwise, I invite you all to take yourselves off mute to say farewell, have a lovely day, and I will stay on just for a couple extra minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was wonderful.
Thank you very much.